Imagine this. A quiet morning, sun just hitting those lush green hills in northern Colombia. You hear the whir of helicopter blades. It's not some adventure movie, it's a routine mission, part of the ongoing struggle there. Then suddenly, out of nowhere, a drone streaks across the sky, and that ordinary flight, it ends in a fiery catastrophe, deep in the jungle. Now picture this, hundreds of miles away, same day, Cali. It's Colombia's third biggest city, bustling, full of life. Then, boom, a cargo vehicle just parked there explodes. Massive blast near a military base. Windows gone, buildings shaking, lives just shattered. This isn't some thriller plot. It's the harsh reality of August 21st, 2025. At least 18 people dead, dozens more injured. Two separate attacks. So today in this deep dive, we're going to unpack exactly what happened. We'll connect these events to Colombia's really tumultuous past, look at the forces driving this, and importantly, understand why it matters to all of us, wherever we are.
It's striking, isn't it, how quickly these events just thrust Colombia right back onto the world stage.
Yeah.
It really highlights that incredibly thin line between the peace they've worked so hard for and the kind of chaos that always seems to be lurking. It's a really stark reminder, I think, that even with major peace efforts, those deep-seated issues can just erupt violently, and now using, well, modern tech.
That fragility, yeah, that's the core of it. Okay, let's dive into that day. August 21st, 2025. First, back to that scene in the countryside. Amalfi in the Antioquia department. A National Police Black Hawk helicopter, a UH-60, was downed. And like you said, this wasn't some high-stakes commando raid. It was a coca crop eradication mission. Routine, but incredibly dangerous work. 12 officers lost their lives just doing their jobs. 3 others survived, but were badly injured.
Yeah, public servants.
Exactly. Imagine trying to weed this enormous, dangerous garden, right? But you're doing it from the air, over hostile ground. The helicopter was just ferrying personnel to these remote coca fields. The aim, destroy the plants, disrupt the drug chain. But then this drone, basically a remote-controlled weapon now armed with explosives, it strikes the helicopter, causes a fire, then the crash. The governor of Antioquia, Andres Julian Rendon, he was pretty clear on social media about the drone's role. Devastating.
And it's important, like you said, these weren't elite soldiers. These were police officers. They're the face of the government trying to, well, maintain some control. Coca eradication, especially flying low over that kind of rugged terrain, it just makes aircraft so vulnerable. The groups controlling these areas, they don't just protect the crops. This is their main income stream. They defend it fiercely.
So this was a direct message.
Absolutely. A direct hit on the state's efforts to curb the drug flow. Drugs that, fuel addiction and violence globally. Later, the defense minister, Ivan Velasquez, confirmed the initial findings pointed to fire, which lines up with that kind of drone strike impact.
And the horror didn't stop there. Just hours later, everything shifts south. To Cali, big city, vibrant, but now the scene of another attack. A cargo vehicle packed with explosives detonates near the Marco Fidel Suarez Aerospace Force Base. That's a major Air Force facility.
Significant, yeah, training base too.
Eyewitnesses describe just chaos. A huge explosion, buildings damaged, cars mangled, smoke everywhere. 6 people killed there. And 71 wounded, many with terrible shrapnel injuries. And the victims, civilians, shop owners, students, just people nearby. It shows how these things ripple outwards, hitting ordinary families.
And the government's response, it's interesting how that played out. President Gustavo Petro, who, has his own past as a former guerrilla.
Right, that adds another layer.
It does. Initially, he reacted fast, pointing fingers, specifically on social media, at the Gulf Clan, Colombia's biggest drug cartel. He suggested the helicopter attack was payback for a huge cocaine bust, a multi-ton seizure that really hit their finances.
Okay, so initial reaction, cartel retaliation.
But then, as more intelligence came in, the focus shifted. Later, he blamed FARC dissidents. He even shared a photo of an arrested suspect supposedly linked to the EMC, the Estado Mayor Central, which is a major dissident faction.
So a shift from cartel to FARC dissidents.
Yeah, and Petro described the suspect as basically working for drug traffickers, which really shows you how blurred those lines are now between sort of old-school insurgency and just pure narco crime.
Is that blurring intentional on the part of the groups or just the reality of how things operate now?
I think it's mostly the reality on the ground. Ideology often takes a backseat to the sheer profit involved in the drug trade. But the government's shifting narrative is also interesting. Blaming FARC dissidents might fit better with Petro's broader narrative about the challenges to his peace plans. And crucially, it might make it easier to push for that international terrorist designation he mentioned.
Ah, right. He talked about urging international bodies to classify them as terrorists. What would that actually mean?
Well, it allows for things like global pursuit, asset freezes, easier extraditions. It ramps up international pressure significantly. It really reflects, I think, a deep frustration, trying to negotiate peace while facing this level of violence. It's a move to bring more weight, international weight, against these groups.
Okay, so to really get why this is happening now and
Hmm.
why these groups are still so active despite peace efforts, we need to look back, don't we? Colombia's history. It's incredibly complex. Resilience, yes, but also just generations of conflict.
Absolutely. You can't understand today without looking at yesterday?
The roots go way back. Before the FARC even existed, you had the 1940s and 50s La Violencia.
Hmm.
That period. It wasn't just political disagreement. It was brutal civil conflict between the main political parties, conservatives and liberals.
Oh.
Over 200,000 people killed. Massacres, extreme violence. It left deep scars.
Deep scars, exactly. And out of that chaos, that sort of power vacuum in rural areas, groups like the FARC emerged in 1964. They started as peasant self-defense units, Marxist-Leninist-inspired, pushing for land reform, social justice, things that were and still are major issues in Colombia with its huge wealth gap.
So initially, some kind of ideological basis.
Initially, yes, but over decades they morphed. They got heavily involved in kidnapping, extortion, and crucially the cocaine trade to fund their operations. By the 90s, early 2000s, they were a massive force, controlled huge parts of the country, fought the military constantly. It was like this endless grinding war. Over 450,000 lives lost in the overall conflict, millions forced from their homes, a staggering human cost.
But then, 2016, a moment of hope. President Juan Manuel Santos brokered that peace deal with the FARC. They agreed to disarm, become a political party. Over 13,000 fighters laid down their weapons. They rebranded. It felt like a real turning point.
It was huge, globally celebrated. But, and this is the crucial but, not everyone signed on. That's where it gets really complicated. You had maybe 2,000, 2,500 fighters who just rejected the deal. They splintered off.
Dissidents.
Exactly. Groups like the EMC, which Petro blamed for the recent attacks, and another called Segunda Marquetalia. They argue the government didn't keep its promises. Things like protecting ex-combatants, and it's true, over 300 have been assassinated since the deal.
Wow, over 300.
Yeah. And they also point to the lack of real change in those poor rural areas, the lack of opportunities that pushes people towards illegal economies in the first place. So they continue the fight, often funded by, guess what?
Drugs. It always comes back to the drugs.
Always. And it makes you wonder, are they really fighting for ideology anymore, or is it just about controlling that incredibly lucrative trade under an old banner?
That's a really critical point. They're not just remnants. They're actively using those grievances, maybe cynically, to justify continued violence and criminal activity.
That's certainly how many see it. And this brings us right back to the drug angle, which, as you said, just makes everything more explosive. Colombia is still the world's #1 cocaine producer. Coca cultivation hit a record in 2023, 253,000 hectares. That's
You
huge.
just try to picture that land area. It's vast. And for the farmers in those remote regions, coca isn't some evil choice. It's often the only economic choice. No roads, no schools, no jobs. It pays way better than coffee or fruit. It's basic survival for many.
It is. And for the armed groups, it's like printing money. They tax the farmers, they protect the fields, they run the processing labs, billions of dollars.
Yeah.
So when the government tries eradication, like that mission in Antioquia, whether it's pulling plants or spraying, it's directly attacking the lifeline of these groups, and the farmers too, often. It's controversial, but it's aimed at breaking that chain.
And it's not just the FARC dissidents, right? You mentioned the Gulf Clan earlier.
Right. They're the other major player. Formed by ex-paramilitaries, they're arguably Colombia's biggest drug cartel now. Very powerful, very sophisticated. They control key drug routes, especially up north, and they're constantly fighting the FARC dissidents for territory. It's a multi-sided conflict over drug profits.
So you have these established cartels, these dissident guerrilla groups, basically acting like cartels. And now, new technology like drones.
Exactly. Drones have changed the game. They used to be sci-fi. Now they're relatively cheap, accessible weapons, allows groups to strike targets like that helicopter from a distance with less risk to their own fighters. Adds a whole new layer of danger.
So connecting the dots, these rivalries, fueled by drug money, turn places like Antioquia into battle zones. That drone attack wasn't random, it was a warning. Stay out.
Precisely. A brutal demonstration of power. And it shows how the drug money doesn't just fund the violence, it corrupts everything. Any ideology gets washed away by the sheer profit motive. Makes peace incredibly difficult to sustain.
Which leads us to President Petro and his total peace idea.
Yeah.
Elected in 2022, first leftist president. big promises. His whole platform was about negotiating with all the armed groups, ELN, guerrillas, FARC dissidents, even the cartels, to finally end the violence.
Ambitious. Hugely ambitious.
Yeah.
But the road has been, well, incredibly bumpy. There's a sort of paradox, isn't there? By talking to everyone, you risk giving legitimacy to groups actively committing violence.
Right, how do you negotiate in good faith with someone who just blew up a helicopter?
Exactly. A ceasefire with the EMC started in 2023, but it got suspended. Why? Because they attacked civilians. There was that horrific incident, March 2025, where they killed 4 indigenous children, caused national outrage.
Unbelievable.
And just back in April 2025, the government had to pause a truce with another FARC faction because of violations. So these August attacks happened against that backdrop of rising tension and failing ceasefires.
And Petro's approach gets criticized too, doesn't it? Moving away from forced cocoa eradication towards voluntary substitution.
Yeah, offering incentives for farmers to switch crops. Critics say, maybe rightly, that it takes the pressure off traffickers in the short term, gives them room to breathe, consolidate.
While the dissidents use the ceasefires to regroup,
Recruit in those poor areas where kids feel like they have no other options.
recruit.
It's a vicious cycle. You can see how maybe, for some groups, these attacks are partly retaliation, but also maybe a way to gain leverage in talks. See how disruptive we can be.
It's like trying to untangle this massive, decades-old knot. Every pole seems to tighten it somewhere else.
That's a good way to put it. And human cost, while we analyze the politics, is just devastating.
You think about those families in Antioquia? Mourning police officers, husbands, fathers, gone. And in Cali, the shop owners, the students, people just walking by, their lives changed forever by shrapnel, by trauma.
Living with that constant fear, rural communities displaced, homes destroyed, it's generational trauma.
Thousands of orphans, widows, poverty stuck at over 30%, inequality fueling the whole mess. It's heart-tipping.
And it ripples outwards globally, doesn't it? That cocaine ends up on streets in the U.S. and Europe. It fuels addiction crises everywhere. The U.S. poured billions into Plan Colombia since 2000, helped the military fight the FARC and drugs. But critics say just militarized the problem, didn't solve the root causes like poverty or demand for drugs abroad.
So, Petro's call to label these groups terrorists, that could really change the international approach. More sanctions, more extraditions.
Potentially, yes. It could significantly boost international cooperation, give more tools to go after assets, leaders. It would be a major shift if it happens.
But there is still hope, right? Despite everything.
There has to be, and there are flickers. The 2016 deal, for all its flaws, did demobilize the main FARC army. Many ex-fighters are living normal lives now, farming, involved in politics. It shows change is possible, even if it's slow and difficult.
And those crop substitution programs, even if criticized, they have worked in some places.
Yes, some regions have successfully shifted to things like cacao, coffee, fruit, creating legal economies. It shows there are alternatives. And you have amazing civil society groups, ordinary Colombians, just relentlessly pushing for peace, for dialogue, for rebuilding. Their resilience is incredible.
So as the investigations into the August 21st attacks go on, the big question hangs there, doesn't it? Will this violence derail the peace process completely, push things back towards all-out conflict?
Or could it possibly do the opposite? Could it shock everyone into realizing the absolute necessity of finding a real, lasting solution? A renewed commitment, maybe? Can Colombia finally break that toxic link between violence and the drug trade? That's the billion-dollar question. And for you listening, it's just a reminder, isn't it? Behind the headlines, behind the statistics, these are real people, real lives. Stories of terrible loss, yes, but also stories of this incredible, enduring fight for peace.
Yeah. Watching Colombia, you see the path is just incredibly hard, full of setbacks, but the determination, that deep desire for peace, it's still there. So, thinking about all this, what stands out most to you, and what do you think it will genuinely take for Colombia to find that lasting peace it deserves?